Hey guys, and happy Halloween. Today we'll be fighting for our life in one of the most famous horror games in history with Resident Evil. Resident Evil debuted as a heavy-hitting survival horror title on the PS1, which turned into an extensive and evolving series, and has spawned a ton of remakes. This Halloween we are treating ourselves to its critically acclaimed and breathtaking remake on the Nintendo Gamecube.
Resident Evil.
The hype for this re-release into the next 3D generation and on a Nintendo platform had a lot of players excited. And this massive overhaul in the game paid off big time, with consistently high and near perfect scores. Resident Evil on the GameCube was virtually in its own category at the time, setting the new bar very high, not only for the series, but with its stunning graphics and superb realism. Players and critics knew they could expect more from the console as well. It's a game that was simply so terrifying, many kids, including myself, would rather watch behind a blanket than dare pick up the controller and try to make it through this dauntingly huge mansion. This may be the first Resident Evil review on the channel, but over the next several Octobers, with the whole series to get through, I can guarantee you it will certainly not be the last. Let's see what it takes to solve those mansion puzzles, unlock all of its secrets, and keep away those bloodthirsty zombies. Watch your step and pay attention. Hope you brought your lockpick and lighter, because I'm Jeff, and this is MarMax Gaming. So we have the choice between two characters, Jill or Chris. They do have considerable differences. The biggest ones are that Jill has a couple more inventory slots and a lockpick on her at all times that work on certain doors. Chris only has 6 inventory slots, has superior strength, which translates into less stabbing with your survival knife, but with how quickly those slots fill up, kinda makes more sense to not carry it and just be careful with your ammo. He's also a bit faster and has the lighter on him at all times. The intro cutscene is a pretty awesome place to start. It's minutes of breathtaking visuals, showing your STARS crew running for their lives from those infamous zombified Dobermans.
But we lost contact.
Look, Chris!
Bravo team's helicopter was a derelict. Save for the remaining body of Kevin.
This impressive 3D actually replaced the PS1 scene that used real actors and actresses, which was at least equally as exciting, surprising, and impressive for its time, to be fair.
This way. Damn it! Make for that mansion!
As your characters get indoors to escape the evil outside, nobody has any idea just how terrifying and twisted things are in the mansion.
What is this place?
Resident Evil uses the door entry graphic to give ample time loading the next detailed area, but it also serves the purpose of a consistent buildup of suspense. As you look around the dining room, Barry discovers some blood, and then follows it with one of the worst ideas possible.
I think you'd better take a look at this.
What is it?
Blood.
Imagine being in a new place with a friend and finding a fresh trail of blood and then telling whoever you're with to go look for clues while you stay behind. He actually does this a few times throughout the game. After finding blood, I think I'd be inclined to stick together and watch the others back, but whatever I guess, because Jill thinks it's a fine idea. This is probably the most famous moment from Resident Evil right here. They did not waste their time in setting their hooks in to disturb the player. If you knew ahead of time, running away from this zombie is the smart move to save ammo, because even if you do use the time and resources to kill the thing, this cutscene is waiting for you either way once you leave the room.
Barry!
What is it?
Look out! It's a monster!
Let me take care of it! What the hell is this thing?
I found Kenneth killed by this thing.
An important thing to mention, despite the fact that this shows a zombie following you from one room to another, they actually can't do that throughout the game. There's just a few select moments where one will walk in a door, but you can always run into another room with one right behind you. Wouldn't be surprised at all if they use this moment to give the player a fear that zombies could follow them, but with each room loading separately every time, you're totally fine to close a door with monsters in it and have nothing to worry about at all. That is, until you enter that room again. Speaking of the rooms though, as you can tell, the atmosphere is super creepy, and what adds to that are the observations made along the way. This painting right here is just one example of that. A picture of two knights striking each other. The short sword has been thrust into the breast of one knight, while the long sword has pierced the head of the other. Stuff like this can easily give you the creeps, and to make matters worse, as you're leaving... Yeah, talk about unsettling. Of course, when you get back into the lobby, Wesker is now missing. After you walk around for a bit, Barry has another bright idea. After seeing two of our STARS members disappear and one have his throat torn out, what should we do?
There's not much we can do. We can search for him separately.
Okay, yeah, let's search separately, because being left alone has been working out so well for everybody else. With the game taking place in a gigantic mansion, it's imperative that Resident Evil at least get the player off to a decent start, and some rooms are much more obvious than others on what you need to do or need to grab. Clearly here, we can see what's shining on top of the statue, and sure enough, when pressing against the dresser, we can move it over to reach it. An important and creative addition to this remake of Resident Evil is that you can acquire self-defense items, which is really awesome and feels like you have a bit more of a fighting chance once a zombie grabs you. Right after you find your first one, the dagger, you get the opportunity to use it too. Hardcore fans would tell you, Resident Evil has a ton of replay value, with it being rooted in exploration and finding efficient routes to grab necessary keys or items. But what's really important is that you don't ruin the game for yourself and at least do your very best to tough your way through your first playthrough. Don't look into what you're supposed to do at all as much as possible, and just see if you and your brain can do the work. This isn't a game where you can just show up for the challenges and solutions will find you. It needs to be a well thought out, thorough, and conscious effort to make it past even just the beginning of Resident Evil. And aside from the comfort of having company, 2 heads or 3 can work better than 1. So it can definitely be a great idea to have a friend and or sibling with you. Pulling up your maps is essential, which shows where you've been, if there's still something to grab, and color codes for the locked versus unlocked doors too. I have to say, after pulling up the map throughout the game way too often, it would have been great if you just had the option to display it on screen. But I suppose this plays even more into the feeling of being a bit lost. Let's talk about key items. As you run around trying doorknobs, you'll realize there are a few specific keys that open all of these doors, if they're not locked from the other side. The first major key you will probably find is the one here out in the graveyard. To an underground chamber of some sort, with a freaking metal coffin chained up to the ceiling. It's not always as simple as just picking up an item though. The thing you'll see now is the Book of Curse, and hopefully you'll have the intuition to examine the item, rotate it to the back, press A to check it out, and then we get the mansion key. If we then turn that key around and observe it, we can identify it as the sword key. You'll notice these 4 stone faces on the wall have missing parts on their face, and it's pretty obvious you'll have to come back to these later on. If you went around checking doors before this, you'll immediately be excited and probably a bit scared for what could be in those handful of doorknobs that had the sword emblem on them. The exploration of the mansion really draws you in because everything feels so tense. You don't know what you're going to run into, you can't save whenever you want, you have to stay oriented when controlling your character, and keep paying attention so you don't miss an important item or clue. Plus the infrastructure and interior design of this place is just super interesting. There's always creepy details. Another creepy moment is when we see an inanimate body face down in this hallway. Because you already know that thing's gotta be there for a reason. It's going to come alive at some point, but we just don't know when. If you can't tell, Resident Evil likes to keep you unsettled and creeped out, with the lack of confidence feeding into it that comes with feelings of limited control. When it comes to boiling down why Resident Evil was and is able to spook so many players, those freaky zombies and other monsters are only one piece of that puzzle. They made some distinct choices that have had a huge impact on the feeling of horror, and I'll touch on 5 of those choices that stood out to me right now. First, your control. It's been described as tank controls, only being able to move forward and back with a wide turning radius, or rotating in place. Up is always forward, down is always backward, while left and right rotate your character. With the wide variety of angles you see your character, you could imagine this can get disorienting or confusing for most people, which plays into the second choice. They used fixed camera angles as you move from room to room throughout the game, having zero control over the camera. It feels like you're watching yourself, in a horror movie, if that makes sense, and sometimes they use limited angles that put you in awkward positions, consistent moments where you have to walk and go out of sight, and of course this can lead to surprises and the occasional jump scare. Thirdly, in just about every game out there with a gun, there's no limitation on running while shooting at the same time. If you're scared of something, you can run away while firing bullets in that direction. But with Resident Evil, there is no such freedom. You can either shoot or move, but never at the same time, as in, this falls in line with our instinctual self-preservation, where we have to make up our mind and choose between fight or flight. Fourth is a quick but important one. You really do have quite limited resources. Not only will new players likely find themselves low or completely out of bullets sometimes, but you also don't have very many inventory slots, so you'll never be running around with multiple weapons and deep pockets of health items, because you're only offered and can only carry so much at one time. And the last thing you want to do is have your hands full when you walk into a key item. Even saving the game can only be done at one of the handful of typewriter locations in the game, if you're holding onto an ink ribbon. If you don't have any of those, well guess what, you can't save until you do. Lastly, we know this game looks creepy and shocking, but its soundtrack is downright terrifying. It'll keep you on edge, and these creepy melodies will definitely stick with you, and quite possibly haunt your dreams. There's a lot of carefully placed and written content throughout, such as diary logs, experimental results, or confidential notes. This note comes in your first real save room that has a storage container for your extra items. There's documentation that says, those beings have 2 ways to prevent them from becoming active again. 1, incineration, and 2, destruction of the head. So what this means is, whenever you kill a zombie, it's not actually dead for good unless you blow up its head with your gun or light them on fire afterward. Fittingly, this save room is where you'll find the fuel canteen, the thing that you fill with kerosene, which only gives 2 uses at a time, before using a lighter on a body. That means if you don't bother doing this for only 2 bodies at a time while going all the way back for kerosene refills, you're eventually going to deal with a stronger and way faster version of the same zombie, known as a Crimson Head. We'll see examples of this later on, but there are some zombies that can run as fast or seemingly faster than you do in this game. My tiny complaint about this is, if a bullet in the head works, why can't I still do that when they're on the ground? I'd be happy to choose that option when I've run out of kerosene, or free up 2 inventory slots without the fuel canteen or lighter. I would use a handgun bullet instead. To make things easier on yourself, you'd have to make things worth your while, like in this bathroom for example. I end up using kerosene on a zombie in a room after realizing it has no locked doors and I'll probably never have to come back here, which is a total waste. Resident Evil won't protect you from your own mistakes or poor choices, that's for sure. It's a hybrid blend of using critical thinking, solving little puzzles, discovering new rooms with new items, and being prepared for moments like this. No matter what, you have to stay calm and make good use of your bullets. Mash like hell when an enemy grabs you, and use your best judgment when you have a crappy camera angle. The second emblem key, which can be tricky to find if you're not reading, and if you already knew what you were doing ahead of time, you might make it the first key to grab, but there are a couple steps to this. Up in this booby trap room, it says that the taker of this key needs to find peace in death, because if you take it, you will die. Opting to put the key back is the only way to stop it. We actually have to use a whistle that we find alongside notes that says a dog has a collar with a key in it on one of the balconies. Knowing that you have to blow this dog whistle on the deck makes you face your fears, because the last thing you want to do is square off with these zombified dogs. But it's what we need to do in order to get the dog collar, to observe and take apart, then observe again to reveal the key we need. Then we can take it and go replace it in the booby trap room to remove it from its holding place. If it's pulled you in properly, Resident Evil is definitely a game you keep trying to play, even when you're frustrated or lost, because you genuinely want to see what else comes next. It's like a scary or disturbing movie that you can't look away from. You can't help but be curious about what else you'll see and find. The puzzles have a pretty wide variety. A good amount have to do with finding certain items and placing them in the right spots, which can take some exploration and a bit of mulling over. Naturally, as you're trying to figure out where to go or what to do next, there's quite a bit of backtracking. This on its own can get kind of annoying, because a prolonged theme of not knowing what to do is one of the lamest feelings in video games for me. But I have to say that Resident Evil usually has a few possible avenues to explore at a time, and if you don't get discouraged and just focus on your map and keep moving ahead, you'll find yourself eventually getting through one challenge at a time as the pieces come together in your head. They may come in spurts, and sometimes slowly but surely. There's a good pace to the threats that you encounter, with spikes of danger every once in a while. Plus, with those zombie revivals, those popping up of unaccounted bodies, it does a good job at keeping you feeling uneasy, whether it's a new room or hallway, or backtracking through the mansion. Aside from the zombies, dogs, and crimson heads, you'd think it can't get much freakier, but when you step into a room like this, and oh my god. Hopefully you don't have a fear of spiders so you can think straight. Getting poisoned by a spider or a snake is pretty annoying because you need a blue herb in order to remove that status. Speaking of the herbs, health items work like this. Your health has 4 levels: Fine, which is green, Caution, yellow, Caution, orange, and Danger, which is red. A single green herb heals 1 level, while combining a green and a red is a full heal. Green and green is a double, of course. The self-defense items give you even more leeway of getting grabbed and prevent taking damage, but basically think of each enemy grab or 2 being a health level, depending on the difficulty, and of course depending on your mash to get out. Something we have to talk about. As you make your way deeper into this game, get more used to backtracking, and patiently trying to move forward, you'll no doubt get pretty annoyed with how stubbornly shitty your inventory situation is. I mentioned earlier several distinct choices they made with Resident Evil that plays into the fear, and plenty of these have to do with imposing discomfort onto the player in one way or another. I believe they thought the overly restrictive and obtuse item management would add to the challenge, but really it adds to the annoyance and time wasted. Here are two great examples that happen to me back to back, and there are more later. A little over 3 hours in, I finally realized why this hallway was still marked as exploring on the map, which means there's still something there to pick up. When I pushed this rack of china aside and kneeled down for the handgun ammo, my gun holds 15 bullets max. Yet I can't pick this up. I thought it was pretty lame that it wouldn't at least give a use option to refill the gun. I mean, in real life, I would swap the clips. It doesn't make any sense. But that's nothing compared to this inexcusable crap in the room I was headed to. In this room is where you're teased with a shotgun in a holster. If you remove it, then you actually can't leave because you'd be smashed in the next room by the ceiling. So in a different part of the mansion, we actually find a broken shotgun. You can probably see where this is going. We have to swap the broken shotgun with the one on the wall that we want. And that's exactly what I was on my way to do. But would you even believe this? You need an open inventory slot for the gun on the wall, even though you're moving the broken one out of a slot anyway. So the reality of the situation is just stupid. If this was real life, this is what it would look like. But since it's this picky system that doesn't even make sense, we have to run all the way back to a storage chest and run all the way back just to do something that we shouldn't even have an issue with in the first place. Coming out of the room with the shotgun and an open inventory slot just reminds you of how dumb that whole thing was. There's surprisingly not even an option to discard an item, even if it's something you can get more than one of. Dumber yet, if your inventory slots are full and you have low health and walk up to an herb, it'll tell you you have no inventory slots, so you can't even heal yourself. To make room in your inventory, you can waste green herbs on yourself with full health, but if you try to do that with the red herb, let's say, it'll tell you there's no use. Wasn't there no use to healing with full health? I mean, come on, the item shouldn't be so horrendous. But like we talked about, I believe they were just trying to toe the fine line of giving the player lack of control or options and how it plays into the horror aspect of the game, versus just being inconvenient, cumbersome, and unreasonable. The shotgun is a huge help though, and definitely worth the headache. There are a ton of highlights and moments worth pointing out through this survival horror classic that can easily take a player over 20 hours to finish if they don't know what they're doing. After spending quite a bit of time in the mansion, it's amazing to see where else this game takes you. Let's talk about and show some of the biggest and craziest moments in the game. There's this live plant that won't let you past it for a key item, so you have to kill it. After mixing the plant poison you found on one deck with the sprinkler in the green room, you turn on the right switch to kill this Tangela from hell. In this hallway is a super creepy moment. You can hear the tapping on the glass, and you see the shadow of a zombie trying to get in. And after enough times going through this hallway, you can guess what eventually happens. Being as intimidating and scary as many of the bosses are, it turns out the fear associated with them is most likely the biggest obstacle to overcome. Like after collecting these 4 masks, each one you place where it belongs, you get these creepy ass cutscenes where the chains keep releasing on this coffin. These bosses can be really dangerous if you're not confidently standing in the right place with your strongest weapons. Since there are multiple ways to go, it's completely possible to get down here with only a handgun. But look at how this fight goes since I've got a grenade launcher with incendiary rounds equipped after finding it in a save room. A huge build-up for hours of gameplay, all for that fight right there. Venturing out to a cabin in the woods is also known as one of the creepiest moments in the entire game, with a ton of lore behind a mutated monster that was once a little girl, named Lisa Trevor. Lisa was a human test subject forced to undergo a plethora of biological experiments conducted by the nefarious Umbrella Corporation, the same party responsible for the T-virus and everything that's going on here in the mansion. It turns out this creature cannot die, and if you didn't know that already, you'd waste a ton of resources and time trying to fight it. This is one of those few moments where flight is your only option, and that's not the last we'll see of her. Later on, you may be quite surprised as you find yourself in a huge industrial basement complete with a flooded aquarium that the mansion is built on top of. And in that water are sharks. It's worth running by them the best you can, and if the sharks don't scare you, the music certainly would. If you spend too much time out there, you better hope you're not standing still, otherwise this would certainly catch you by surprise. Not to mention the part where you have to pull levers in the proper order to initiate the safety walls and drain the tank of its water. You have to watch your step once you're down there too, because these sharks are still dangerous. It's pretty awesome what you end up doing to that gigantic shark that isn't quite dead yet, that almost had you earlier. We have another example of a gigantic animal. Check out this huge snake just circling your character. If you're in the right spot, you really can just unload easy shots with your launcher. After just 5 or so of those, you're through the fight. I didn't know it at the time, but you don't even have to fight this thing. You can just run in and grab the key item you need and leave. But you do have to square off against the snake again later on, no matter what you do. Keeping in line with giant things, we have this gigantic plant from hell. You have to find some type of rhythm in order to shoot and then move out of the way of its whips. But as long as you keep firing and have some health items on you, it's really not a bad fight at all. But it is quite freaky. Let's talk about a couple more chilling moments with some zombies. There's a room you come into as you can hear the tension of a rope. It turns out this guy knew he was transitioning into a zombie and wanted to kill himself. He has notes of regret to his family. It's honestly pretty sad. But sure enough, as you enter and exit that room, the T-virus has taken him over. Another moment is the Keeper's Diary. It starts out sounding like some disgruntled worker making logs to complain, being cheated in a poker game, and about the dogs they kept in cages for experimentation. It goes on to eventually saying how he feels sick, super hot, extremely itchy, and some of his flesh starts to fall off. He asks, "What the hell is happening to me?" As it goes, the writing becomes more simplistic, as you're reading his final messages before he turns. May 19th, 1998. Fever gone, but itchy. Today hungry and eat doggy food. May 21st, 1998. Itchy, itchy, Scott came, ugly face, so killed him. Tasty. And one more time. Itchy, tasty. And as soon as you're done reading that book, Resident Evil keeps you bouncing around in many of the same areas as you try to figure out your way around this mansion, so when you finally encounter major changes of scenery, it makes you sit up and realize there's so much more to this game that maybe you couldn't reach when you were younger. A lot of the places and moments are downright crazy. It's nothing at all that I would expect from just the surface level understanding of what Resident Evil is. Being down in the mines is also quite memorable. Believe it or not, one of the most dangerous things in Resident Evil are these couple of boulders. If you're not ready to run in the right spot, this could easily be your fate. In case you thought we were done with spiders, we actually face off against a gigantic one known as a black tiger. We encounter Lisa Trevor again, and have to avoid her in this roundabout. We even reach what looks like her real home, with an array of pictures of her and her family. The lore with Lisa Trevor continues, and it's really disturbing. She has journal entries that basically says she ripped off her mother's face and sewed it to her, so her mom can be with her at all times. You also discover diary entries from Lisa's mother saying how much she loves Lisa and how scared she is, and that they should plan their escape. Basically, Lisa was only living for her mother, and once she lost her, well, she's been a lost and tormented soul ever since. We do finally square off against her, and if you trust Barry with his gun, he'll actually help you with the fight. I guess I should mention that he abandoned you down here earlier.
Jill, you're alive.
But we'll get back to that.
I was worried.
Start talking.
Time to talk. Jill, hand me my gun!
When you push the stone pillars off the edge, the coffin cover slides to reveal her mother's skeleton. Getting to the end of the game, we finally encounter the lab. It's not a huge area, but there's plenty to get in your way. And I'm not just talking about enemies. This area is accessible after, of course, we've cracked open the game for a second time to use its second disc. Basically, you can only unlock a couple rooms if you can figure out the second password to this computer. Figuring out the John and Ada part isn't too bad, but putting up the X-rays in alphabetical order is when shit hits the fan. Doing this isn't hard, but what you're supposed to gather from it, to me, is ridiculous. So when we hit this light, we can see the 4 sections are glowing red. This is when it'd be great if they gave you a hard hint at what this means. But we're supposed to realize that the password notes are talking about using the first letter of what each of these 4 body parts start with. So first X-ray highlights the colon, then the esophagus, the liver and lungs. The worst part is, although there's an anatomy diagram to the side, it just tells you part of it is glowing red. For me, I need more direction than that. Even a pointer like, part of it is glowing red. What could that mean? If not outright telling you the 4 parts that are glowing red. What I'm trying to say here is these dots were so far apart, I would have needed the longest rope in the world to connect them. Perhaps they thought it was a good idea to sell game guides, but honestly, if I didn't have any way to figure this out, I'd be beyond frustrated. And upset, honestly. Take the first initial of these 4 parts. You get cell. Wow, now we can actually go to finish this game. The final challenges are grabbing a fuel canteen and filling it with a highly explosive fuel that you need to power the elevator. In this part of the game, we also encounter these things, chimeras. you'll want to clear them out before you grab the explosive fuel, because it's not just running that can detonate it, but firing your weapons as well. The very final part of the game, when we discover Wesker, is tied in with the Umbrella Corporation conspiracies and not on our side at all. We also see why Barry hasn't been very helpful for most of the adventure, because Wesker has his family hostage. We're about to encounter the final enemy of the game, known as a tyrant.
System has been activated. All personnel must evacuate immediately.
As the self-destruct sequence initiates, we can't forget about our partner Chris, down here in the cell, who we can save if we've gathered the 3 MO discs and put them into the readers that actually resemble a Gamecube, which is a really cool touch. Since we saved him, it's considered a better ending and more complete run, but the game isn't over yet. We have one more face-off on the helipad. After quite a bit of shots have hit the tyrant, we can finally finish this thing off.
Jill, use it! Kill it, whatever it is!
Resident Evil is a one-of-a-kind experience. I wish I had more time this year to play it through a second time with Chris and at higher difficulties. There's always next year, and there's more where that came from. Not to mention many other great choices, and a certain zombie title that still needs to be taken down on this channel. I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks so much for the likes and comments, they help the channel grow so much. I look forward to seeing you guys for the next 8-bit episode. Stay safe, have a great rest of your day, and again, happy Halloween.